Hello, welcome to the TEAS working group on our virtual or online IETF 109. We have, I'm Lou Berger, Pavan Biram's online. I think we have Matt. I'm not sure if Matt is here, but he's always very helpful and as our working group secretary. As usual, the material is online. You can also, if you click on the chat button, you should be able to see the links to that. Excuse me. And you'll also see the link to CodeEMD, which is our collaborative minute taking. Please do go join us there. There's only a few people there right now. Please join us there. And if you hear comments said during the session, please help by capturing those, particularly if you also say comments. See if I can flip slides. There we go. This is a formal IETF meeting, which means our note well applies, and everything we say and do here is governed by our process and becomes part of our permanent record. Obviously, we're using Meet Echo for this meeting. If you're joining us today live, you're you know that because that's how you joined. We also are recording, and as usual, minutes, audio, and video will be published. And so again, everything you say here is part of that record. And again, please help with the minute taking. As always seems to happen, we end up with a very packed agenda. No matter how much time we request, we always seem to fill it, which is great. It's nice to have an active working group. The only thing that's changed since originally published is we reordered things a little bit. So if you happen to look at the first version of the agenda, you may find yourself moved around in time and in order. There was some minor tweaking on time just to fit all the requests. We do give preference, of course, to working group drafts and other chartered activities. We will continue to be working this way for a while. As everyone has seen, IETF 109 is, this is updated a bunch of different slides. IETF 110 is going to be online. So our next one is online. We're online now. We'll continue working this way for a while. Please use the list, and we have the online WebEx available for both informal meetings and formal interims. All it takes is to get one of those is to make a request to the chairs, and we will set you up with it. For interims, you can also request an interim, although we will initiate those as we think necessary. As you saw, sometimes we initiate and they don't quite work out, as happened with our last interim. But we want to use these online meetings between IETFs to keep our process going, so that even though we're not meeting in person, we keep the momentum going. Our formal IPR process, which we do polls both at working group acceptance and as part of our last call, hasn't changed. But I think everyone is familiar with it. But it's always good to show this to remind newcomers. We're going to walk through the active drafts in a moment. Pavan will do that. In terms of where we are from the publication process, we have one new RFC. This is actually quite a bit of work that was done to get us here, and it's a significant foundational document in our Yang work. And this is about this allows us to represent TE topologies in Yang. It took quite a while to get there, and we really appreciate all who contributed to it and their hard work. We have one document that is with the IESG There was actually, but Fawn, I think you were going to talk about this on the in the next slide deck, so I'll leave it for there. And we also have had one new adoption since the last meeting. We haven't received any liaisons. We have jointly sent one liaison, and it shows what are recent drafts and RFCs, as well as working group changes. It's available if you're looking online. You can click on that link. And with that, we're going to jump into more detailed status on drafts, and I'll bring that up in a second.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Pawan Biram. I'm your other co-chair. Working group document status, as you can see on the slide, is next on the agenda. We do have a very packed agenda, so I'll try and keep this as terse as I can. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we currently have 21 working group documents. They're all listed here. 5 of those, the ones that are marked in blue, are on the agenda today. There is one draft, the PCE native IP draft that Lou was referring to earlier, is currently under ISG processing. It's actually currently with our AD. There was a new revision published for this over the weekend, addressing Deborah's comments. There will be further guidance on the proposed status of this document that would be provided in a few days' time. So the guidance would be to change the proposed status to informational. So keep an eye out for that email. So that leaves us with 15 other documents. The status of each of them is covered in this deck. The modeling drafts for T. Let's stay on the yeah. The modeling drafts for T and RSVP and L3 and SR topology augments are all nearing completion. They've all had a young doctor review done. We also have Tom Petch diligently reviewing each of these, thanks to him. The authors have been making sure that each of his comments do get addressed. There's also this new expectation, rather recommendation from the young doctors to add a JSON instance of the young model in the appendix of the draft in which the model is proposed. So the plan for most of these documents is to address the last set of comments from Tom, add the JSON instance to the appendix, and then request working group last call. So in the meantime, it would be great if you could get some more reviews and feedback and on the usability of these modules. There are a couple of young documents that are listed here as ready for young doctor review. Those are the ACTN VN Yang and the path computation Yang documents. We initiated the review process for both of these documents over the weekend. We also have 3 documents marked in red here, which are currently in expired state. The authors have promised to revive those this week. So before we move on to the next slide deck, there are a couple of topics that I would like to double click on. So let's jump to slide 6. Yeah, so this is the SMP draft. There are a couple of open items for which the authors are seeking some inputs. They did start a couple of threads for this on the list. Adrian did chime in on one of them. I would encourage others to participate in those threads and help the authors close them. Let's go to slide 7. This is the document that discusses PCE-CC use cases. A few meetings back, there was some debate on whether we should just remain as a living document and not go through the publication process. We decided then to revisit the status of this document at a later point in time. We believe it is that time now. The authors have just requested to change the state of this document to adopt it for working group info only. We would like to get some opinions in on this before we make the change. We understand there's been a fair bit of work put in to get this document to the stage, and don't really want to discourage folks from making similar contributions going forward. So if the authors and anybody who wants to chime in with their thoughts, yeah, it would be great. Dhruv or any of the authors, would you like to say something?
So I think based on the past comments, we thought that because the ISG itself was not preferring too many use cases documents, especially when the extension work was almost ready, and these documents have done their job of convincing the working group and the IETF that this work is needed. So that was the understanding we were in, but we would respect whatever opinion that the chairs and the AD suggest. And if there is a push to publish, we would of course be more happy to publish it because we have done the work. But we are following the guidance that is given to us, so we are completely open to what you throw our way.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else would like to chime in? So Lou and I would discuss this with AD and make a call on it. We will share the outcome of that discussion on the list. I will stop here with respect to this deck. I'll let you go through the rest of the slides and also the reports that are sent to the list in leisure. Please do send out an email on the list if you find anything missing. So any quick questions on the status of any working group document before we invite Dhruv to present the next presentation? I guess not. Dhruv, you're up.
I will be presenting an update to 3 working group documents. They are all Yang model related to ACTN and VN. Next slide. So we have 9 Yang models here. We have a VN Yang model, augmenting of TE and VN for KPI telemetry, and a bunch of service mapping model, where a generic types model and then augmentation of various service models and network model. So let's go over an update of each of them. Next slide. And maybe one more. You can. Yes. So this is an introduction to what VN Yang is. This is the Yang model for VN operations. It is from the customer point of view. We use heavily the abstract topology and the connectivity matrix to represent the VN model, and it is a higher abstraction. It is from the customer's point of view, and this has been sort of like getting ready for a while. We are, as Pawan earlier mentioned, that we think that we are Yang Doctor review ready, but I will quickly go over what are the recent set of changes that we have made. Next slide. So if you guys remember, in the last meeting, we presented an suggestion from Kenichi Ogaki from KDDI, where he wanted to make a change to the VN compute. We discussed that during the last meeting, and that change has been incorporated in the draft. So basically the change allows the VN compute RPC to be a single RPC that can be used to make a single call to get the result, or the VN result, in one call. As I mentioned earlier, since we were dependent on T topology, earlier this was a 2 call. So that they wanted to simplify, and the way to simplify was pretty straightforward. We optionally included 2 groupings in the VN compute. These are the T types grouping for generic path constraints and T types grouping for generic path optimization. By reusing these 2 groupings in VN compute, we are able to now get the results and pass all the information needed for VN computation in one RPC call. This has been done at the VN level as well as at the VN member level. So this is the main change that we have done. But continuing, there were some more comments. That's in the next slide. So those are our current pending work. So the pending work is there was a request from Kenichi that if we can describe this by a figure. So that has been asked. So we have a figure pending that we will add for VN compute. There are some editorial comments that are still pending from Tom Petch. I kind of missed them when I was updating. I realized it later. So when I was making these slides, so I will update on that. And as I said earlier, that I think we are ready for Yang Doctor review. So this finishes the VN compute. If you have any questions, I think you can jump to the queue. I can answer right now or at the end of all the 3 presentations. Either way, it's good with me. But I'll continue to save some time. So the next update is the KPI telemetry Yang. We have two Yang models here, which augments the T model and the VN model. It adds the various PM telemetry characteristics as well as the scaling intent mechanism into these two model. This allows the customer to subscribe to, whether at the VN level or at the T tunnel level, various PM characteristics, as well as we have a concept called autonomic scaling intent, which has been there from the start. So the update in this document, next slide, is it's pretty basic. We had a change, added some editorial cleanup of the Yang model. There were some references that were incorrect, so that got fixed. We had a comment that we should describe how the VN level performance metric is calculated. So we have added that detail in the description of how at the VN level these metrics are computed, which is usually the max of the VN members. So that's the minimal change in this document. The next, what we have is, next slide. So next we have the key service mapping Yang. As I said, there are a bunch of augmentation in this model. I will just quickly describe what this model is in the next slide. So the role of this T service mapping model is to create a mapping relationship between various service models that we have in IETF, L3SM, L2SM, layer 1 CSM, as well as we also allow the same grouping to be used for the network models as well. And we map these service and network model to our T's Yang models at various levels, at the topology level, at the tunnel level, or at the VN level. So the main reason why we do this, so that we could have a very seamless service operation, that when the customer is thinking in terms of L3SM and underlying there are T tunnels involved, we have a mapping between how those services are being delivered using the underlay TE resources. This allows us to do various monitoring, diagnostic, and various other things to maintain this mapping. Next slide. So what has been updated? As you know, L3NM and L2NM were added in the last update, which we discussed in the working group. We added a thing called T mapping template. There was a support for SR policy that was added. So these were all the changes that we made last time. And there were a comment on the mailing list again from Kenichi, and we are very thankful to him to come up with new use cases as he's implementing this model. So one requirement that they had was they wanted to map one L3SM to actually multiple VN models. And they said that they have a use case that is needed for this. And we discussed on the list, it doesn't harm us to have a mapping. I think the most usual case would be 1:1 case. But if an operator wants to further break it down into multiple VNs and maintain them separately for some reason, it doesn't harm from the Yang modeling point of view. So that's why this change has been made, and this was discussed on the list in the past as well. Apart from that, the changes were, there were some errors in our XPaths that were pointed out to us, which we have fixed. After posting this update, there was some more discussion, which is on the next slide, where Kenichi asked us to also handle QoS profile, which I will describe. So what you see are the two further augments that we discussed on the mailing list that needs to be added, which is at the L3 VPN site level, they have a QoS profile, and they allow you to create a custom QoS profile and give constraints, etc., right there at the site level. So there, they wanted to maintain a mapping between these custom QoS profile and the VN AP that is created by our to service this this custom QoS profile. So that 1:1 mapping, we are maintaining it here. So we wanted to get more feedback from people, especially who have implemented L3SM and have feedback on this, whether this augment makes sense, and if needs to change, we will make that change in the next slide. And that covers all the changes that we have made in the last these 3 Yang models. Any comments?
See, Oscar is in the. Oscar, go ahead. Oscar, go ahead.
You have to unmute.
There is an unmute button on the top, the mic button.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Okay, I didn't press that one. So my question is, in the latest change that was proposed, it was an augment on L3SM to map the QS. So would that also apply to L3NM? That very simple.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I feel like that custom QoS class, if it is existing in the L3NM, then of course it would. I have to check whether that's the case or not, and I think you can answer it right away. You would know whether you have something like custom QoS profile in L3NM as well.
We have all the profiles because they apply also to they apply to both service model and network model. The profiles apply to both.
Yeah, so then I would definitely augment both. This is just an example for L3SM. I'll make sure that that's applicable for every other place where it's needed.
Okay, thank you.
Someone else in queue, it looks like they dropped.
I saw Italo briefly. Italo, you still have a comment?
As Oscar.
Okay, guess not. We can proceed.
Thank you.
Next up is Dan.
Hi, chairs. I was actually going to present my screen remotely if possible. I've just requested the screen. Okay. Can you hear me clearly?
We can.
Yeah, I'm trying to grant it. It doesn't seem to be doing it. Maybe I have to stop her. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, let's see if this works. I'll be a guinea pig.
Yeah,
right.
great. I actually appreciate
Cool.
that. Better for us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay, hi guys. It's morning here in the UK. I'll be talking about the applicability of ACTN to POI, Packet Optical Integration. There is 2 documents actually that attempted to show the applicability of ACTN to POI, and actually the document that you see currently is the merger of these efforts. That's why we do have quite an exhaustive list of sort of authors and contributors, a good percentage actually of the TEAS working group. So what is the intention of the work? It's really to show almost a cookbook of how you would take the functional architecture of ACTN, the various functional components, the specific interfaces, and what procedures and protocols, specifically data models, you would use in order to set up and operate packet over optical services. So this is really important, I think, work, because it highlights all of the discussions that we're having with sort of the separate protocols and data models, and how we will use those in order to sort of deploy these services. And from an operator perspective, as well as a vendor perspective, it's important to know if these procedures and models are actually suitable and fit for purpose. We spend all this time actually developing Yang models, but how efficient are they, and what are the gaps tends to be sort of after we've deployed them in the field if there isn't sufficient interop or implementation early on in the development of the document itself. So we know actually that the focus of the work is going to be on the southbound interfaces. So it's predominantly between the multi-domain service coordinator and the underlying controllers or managers. So the physical, the packet physical, and the optical physical network controller. And ideally, when we finish the work, we will have a fairly good understanding of what are the available models. You know, some are optional. You know, how are they used? Were there specific implementation or technology gaps? Are there operational management security issues that were not identified during the development of some of these procedures and protocols? So how about a reference architecture? Well, it's fairly formulaic. Essentially, it's sort of 4 domains. So we have a hierarchy of our packet layer that sits on top of the optical layer, and then sort of horizontally we've got domain 1 and domain 2. And these interfaces in black are between the MDSE and then the packet and the optical PNCs respectively. And then we've got a further set of interfaces between the PNC and the optical PNC to the actual layer, the sort of technology domain where the actual sort of nodes sit. And you know, already there are a number of generic and technology specific models that we can use, and we're seeing a number of kind of not necessarily issues, but some sort of clarifications that may be needed there, and I'll cover that a little bit later. What isn't in scope, of course, is above the MDSE, but it turns out actually that some of the operators who are involved in the work are very interested in sort of having that discussion, but for the time being, it's kind of out of scope. So if you were to read the document in its current form, we've managed to do sort of the first pass of merging the sort of prior 2 documents that I highlighted earlier. So we currently have sort of 2 phases that we're working on, phases or scenarios, I suppose you might call these, but it's how we generate the view of the network. So our sort of physical network topology discovery, and then existing service topology discovery, how that information is carried between the various PNCs to the MDSC. There are some sort of procedures, some aspects sort of operationally that are kind of interesting to consider, and this includes things like the link discoveries and the attachment discovery. So some operators might see this discovery mechanism as being a sort of security risk. You know, other operators may see it as something that would be nice to have. So whether it's static, whether there's some sort of automated process, that's kind of some of the discussion that we're having in the document currently. So I mentioned already that we've identified the common YANG models, you know, so the T service and the topology YANG models, and then we've got our sort of technology specific extensions or augmentations that we're using as well. And this is essentially the ingredients that we're using as part of our cookbook. There are of course some service models that we are considering as well for some of the packet aspects. Also, sorry, not service model, network model. So our L2NM and our L3NM models there. And another aspect to consider here is the ongoing discussion whether to use the uni topo versus client topo. So essentially, what augments RFC 8345 with the service attachment point abstraction discussion. We know that what we're sort of highlighting in our document is occurring as a parallel discussion in things like the ops area and actually sort of in other documents here in TEAS and also CCAMP. So there are some discussion points around the implementation of ACTN and POI that are still ongoing. So clearly, the work that we're doing is just kind of feeding into some of that parallel discussion. Good. So I think I just highlighted actually some of the chapters or sections in our document. So if you have read the document, you may have noticed there's actually quite a lot of text, and clearly, I'm sure the chairs and certainly the IESG would appreciate brevity or succinctness with this type of document. But I just want to kind of highlight actually that because there are sort of so many options and various permutations, it's really important, I think, to document some of our assumptions. And maybe going forward, we can actually prune, or distill some of this discussion text to make it sort of a little less bloaty in the document. But at least for the time being, we've just kind of captured all of the discussion and probably sort of spent too much effort working on our assumptions and documenting those assumptions. So maybe going forward, we will definitely try to prune that text down. But some of the meat of the document here is contained within section 4, because this is how we actually solve some of these scenarios. So as I mentioned already, how we populate the topology and current connectivity, and then how we establish our sort of optical and then packet services on top of that. So what are we currently working on? Well, there are numerous open issues. These are sort of tracked. Sort of the current trend seems to be to use GitHub, and we will be mindful, of course, not to do all of our work via GitHub. What we will sort of attempt to continue, and I hope we've achieved this so far, is to address some of the sort of the issues, the open discussion points. For instance, there may be how we discover and populate inventory in the MDSC from the PNCs. What are the service attachment points that we're using versus sort of some of the discussion around uni and client and what's actually being exposed. These are discussions that can occur ideally on the TEAS working list, mailing list. But we will also be sort of discussing these during our almost weekly call that we actually have for this particular piece of work, and then reporting some of the findings, some of the conclusions that we reach on these separate calls on the mailing list itself. Some of the other sort of hot topics at the moment are around isolation. We know that sort of network slicing and isolation, so sort of providing circuits, providing bandwidth to particular customers or particular topologies that are then represented in the MDSC is kind of a hot topic, and whether that's a soft or hard isolation continues to be an ongoing discussion. What we haven't addressed in the document that will be in the next version are some of the additional operational issues, and Drew just kind of highlighted that with some of the telemetry discussion on the previous talk. So not only, of course, are we providing network connectivity for sort of packet over optical services, but we almost certainly will want to monitor that connectivity, and in the event of some kind of degrade in service and certainly loss of connectivity, it needs to be reported adequately. And appropriate action needs to be changed, or appropriate action needs to be taken, and potential network changes will incur. What isn't as sort of discussed in the document currently is things like sort of pre-computed path protection for either type of service. That seems to be just a step too far at this point. Thank you. I think those are all the slides I have.
We have Joel on the queue. Joel, go ahead.
I wasn't going to raise this, but since you made a point of mentioning isolation, may I suggest you don't talk in terms of isolation? that you talk in terms of observable service parameters, confidence of delivering observable service parameters, and at least until there is actual working group agreement on what the heck isolation means and how it's supposed to be related to anything else, just stay away from it.
Point taken, clearly understood. Thanks, Joel. That's a great point.
Anybody else? Guess not. Thanks, Dan. Adrian, you're up next.
Great. Just wait for that slide to show up. So this is RFC 3272 BIS. So 3272 is the overview and discussion document for traffic engineering in the internet. And way back, we decided that it would be helpful to update this old document. So we did a couple of revisions, and then it got adopted in July. And it has been silent since then. And in my opinion, silence is not particularly helpful. It is not indicative of work in progress. It's really indicative of nobody having the energy. So since I had volunteered, in inverted commas, to be the editor of the work, I updated in early July just to capture a couple of points that were raised during the adoption poll, in particular whether the components of traffic engineering all needed to be present for a system to be truly traffic engineering. And this is phrased in terms now of TE versus partial TE. Since then, I've embarked on editorial polish, so going through the text, which was, I think, somewhat in Daniel Aducci's tone of voice, and been polishing it a little bit. The 02 came out at the start of the month, where I'd reached 2.4.1. I've just posted 03 today, where I have reached section 5.3, which is almost exactly halfway through the document. So I'll keep working on that. And from here on, the choice of how we proceed is either we get some input from the working group, anyone or everyone, and that's edits or text suggestions or comments or complaints. There are 7 sections needing technical overview material. They're all marked TBD, so they're very easy to find in the document, and they cover QUIC, IGPTE, Alto, network slicing, deterministic networking, SDN, and intent-based networking. And if anybody wants to supply text for any of those sections, that would be most welcome. You might drop a note to the list just to say you're doing it, so that nobody else works on the same section at the same time. So failing anybody else doing anything, my plan would be to complete the document by Christmas myself, either by carefully polishing or hitting it with a hammer, depending on how short of time I am, and then asking the chairs to get on and last call it in the new year as early as possible, because one way or the other, I think it's clear that the working group will have finished whatever it thinks needs doing, and we need to get that review and be finished. That's it.
Any comments?
So I see someone typing in Comey MD a comment. It would be good if they made the comment.
Jeff, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Oh, you can also. I'll do the Intel-based networking part.
Lovely, thank you.
I'll do it on a daily basis.
Which day?
Every day.
Okay, that's your intent.
Yep, I have great intentions.
We have Drew and Boris next. Drew, go ahead.
Working group. I think when we started on this work, our main intention was that we can point to this document when somebody outside the working group, maybe BRTE comes to mind, and SR policy and SRTE discussion that we had. So should we also evangelize this work and say, like, look, we have now a good reference being ready, and see if outside the working group people can start using it. And that could also give us some inputs whether we have succeeded in our mission in clarifying what is TE in 2020.
I think I'm picking that from the bottom. Yes, if people are able to use it, it will give us a good idea that we've done a good job. But before pushing it out for other people, with us saying this is the reference, I would like to hear more than just me saying this is this document captures our opinion. And I'm not hearing that at the moment.
Okay. Boris?
Hi, Adrian. So just as Jeff mentioned, I also would like to volunteer and help you with those additional text pieces.
That would be perfect. So please have a look at the document, grab a section and write some text. I'm only looking for each of these sections. I'm only looking for sort of 3 paragraphs. Otherwise, the document becomes unbalanced. So it shouldn't be big work.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for driving this forward. There is still a fair bit of work to be done. So if anyone is interested in contributing, please do reach out to Adrian and see how you can help. We are now moving to that segment of the session for which most of you have been waiting for and are up at an odd hour. 75 minutes of network slicing topics coming up. So after the last IETF, we did an adoption poll for a couple of documents that were produced by the design team. The calls failed, but it did generate a lot of great discussion. It sort of resulted in a bit of a reset with respect to the terminology. The authors have been focusing on addressing the comments that were raised during the adoption poll, and we will hear from them about it in a little bit. The discussion on the list seems to suggest that we are converging on some controversial items. So like everyone else, I'm also eager to see how this session progresses. So before we bring Yari in to give a brief update on the design team, Lou, do you have anything else to add?
We'll see how it goes today and figure out what the right next step is. Thanks for the intro, and over to Yari.
Okay, do you hear me okay?
You can.
Yeah, so if you can just move to the next slide. So my intent was not to speak at length, just sort of give a very high level status report and, way forward and, where are we and where are we not. So as Vishnu mentioned, we attempted to do a working group adoption in August or in the summer, which didn't succeed, but I think there's reason to think that we can succeed. And we are close. The issues during the summer were primarily around terminology, names in particular, and isolation, a few other topics. And since then, a lot of work has happened, a lot of discussion has happened. Revisions have been made, I believe, on the name issue of calling these terms a particular thing is that's a solved issue. But one would observe that once you move past some issue like this, like you don't like the name of a thing, it's only then that some people actually get to think more about the actual content or substance of things. So I think some of the discussion that we've seen recently is in that category, that okay, now we sort of put that thing past us, but let's now look at what the thing actually says. And so Adrian's drive for more accurate definitions is in this category, some of the discussion isolation, some discussion on scope, and so forth. Screen's changing. Okay, now it's back. I think my advice, at least for this, is that we should find what is the commonly acceptable minimal set of things and move on. The reason for that is really that there's a lot of things that we could do. Let's agree on the simple things, and the concepts discussed here are actually important for other work, and maybe not in terms of like actual reference to or document dependency as such, but there's a lot of work that sort of enters the space one way or the other. And if we actually had some agreement about the terms, what are we even talking about? Then I think that would be beneficial to keep the thing together. So, for instance, anything that's discussed in this section of the agenda, like it's highly dependent on this. So, and the final comment is that we had a design team. The design team produced some results that were discussed by the working group, and we've intentionally wanted to move the discussion to the working group. Like, it's not that the design team has much discussions. It's mostly practical, if anything. So everything is really in the hands of the working group. And so, we design team have no particular status. The authors can propose stuff, and they have, and they revise documents. Thank you for that. But I think the agreement needs to be found in the working group amongst all of us. So I think that's the setup for Kiran and others to start talking about the actual details and substance. So I think I'm done here, unless people have high-level comments at this point. I think we can move on.
Any comments? We'll move on. Karen, you can go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Gary, for providing the overview, and let's get into the details of what we have been doing, specifically from the definitions draft perspective. And as you notice, the name of the draft has changed, and I'll just provide an update on behalf of all the authors. Next slide, please. So an overview of the changes. So things you look at the left column, they have been pretty stable, even if we have gone through different discussions in between two IETFs, 108 and 109, and interim meeting. Our core definition hasn't changed. The way we describe the characteristics of structure and stakeholders, different sections, they haven't changed a whole lot in terms of the content. What we did bring change was related to the naming, of course, and then we improved some of the text related to SLI and SLOs, because they are also the core part of the concept that we are bringing in with network slices. And there was an action item to bring in some text for isolation. We also got a feedback that security consideration should not be left empty, so some text was provided there. And we also got some feedback to remove a lot of descriptive text from the document and probably make it a candidate for framework draft later on. Next slide, please. So in interim meeting, it was mentioned that transport slice is, as a name, is not acceptable. It was non-starter. So we polled the mailing list, came up with 14 suggestions, and it seems that IETF network slice was the name which was majorly selected. And if you want to see the pluses and minuses of all the names mentioned here, I have attached 2 slides at the bottom, so you can look at it later on. Next slide, please. And once we changed the name, how rest of the content changed into the document. Now we don't have transport slices. We very clearly define that we are talking about IETF scoped network. In our document, we qualify term IETF because there was a great amount of discussion that there are other parts in the network where you would use network slicing. So IETF network slice is not an end-to-end solution. So having some kind of a prefix or a qualifying term for IETF technologies was necessary. And the definition remains the same. Whatever we had as transport controller is now called IETF network slice controller. And accordingly, we have changed NSCs and NSREs as well. Next slide, please. And in terms of improvement, I got a lot of review comments, mainly from Adrian, where we kind of restructured the document, changed the nesting in the sense some sections were pulled out at the top level, and that we also deleted a lot of stuff to make document more readable. And I mentioned earlier that now we have a better text for SLO, SLI, and it's easy to read also. It blends in with the rest of the sections much better. And there was a general feedback that you should not be talking about too many details about realization of the slices in this definitions draft. So we took a lot of section related to that and some of the use case description we had from the document. We also had quite a lot of discussion on what vertical or horizontal slices mean. And we have taken that out for now, and hopefully framework document will find some space for that kind of explanation. But right now we just describe the concepts that how you would extend the slices using hierarchical or sequential mechanisms. It's very brief right now. Next slide. And so one of the major discussion was on isolation text, and the way we brought in the text is by explaining what we mean by isolation. And the key point here we want to highlight is that from a consumer perspective, there should be no negative impact on that customer slice whenever there are changes in other parts of the network. And then we have added text to describe it in certain ways. And another thing we want to highlight here is that customers should be able to ask for isolation explicitly. Yes, it is possible that in some cases there are certain SLOs that will satisfy isolation requirement, but in other cases customer may have explicit requirement because they feel the need that, okay, I feel that this thing will not negatively impact me, so I would explicitly ask for that. So we decided to keep that text there, and I just described why it should be SLO or not, so we are not going to get into that debate. And there was a discussion that we should just keep a placeholder and not provide any text before workgroup adoption. But we felt that providing some text that we can refine going forward is much better than just leaving it blank. Next slide. And we still have a couple of review comments. One is related to improve the security section further to describe it in a slightly better manner, and we are working on it. There was one comment from Med on the mailing list that from his perspective, the document still looks like connectivity centric, and he needs to provide us some more comments where he thinks that something is missing and what is that thing that he would like to get added into the document. Next slide. So this is where we are. I personally think that we could go ahead with the work group adoption. Mainly the reason is that a lot of people have contributed here. And yes, we are still discussing a couple of items, but by and large document has remained stable from last 6 months. Of course, readability has improved a lot as we kept refining things. And so the open issues are rather incremental, and hopefully we can converge on them. So that was my last slide. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Joel, you too?
Ketan, I really wish you hadn't put in text on the isolation, because I would really like to be able to adopt the document. But the text you have put in doesn't work. It isn't a definition. It instead introduces ambiguity that maybe there's something here, maybe there isn't. We had agreed to leave placeholder in. I was comfortable with having a section that said, this is a topic that's under discussion and we could do it later, but the text you put in doesn't work for me. And if there's an adoption call with the text as it is, given how misleading it is, I would have to object to the adoption.
So that is, so what is the criteria for workgroup adoption? We can still continue to improve the document after that. I mean, we need some starting text, don't we?
No, we don't need starting text on isolation. The agreement was not that you were going to provide starting text. The agreement was we were going to leave a placeholder in.
But
Yes,
what will we
this
write
is
into
not
that
done
workgroup?
allow me to finish, Ketan. The working group can improve the document, but at the same token, I am not, as a working group member, obliged to adopt text that I think is actually wrong. And in this case, I think the text you have put in is wrong. And that's an obstacle to adoption. Places where it needs refinement, of course there's places that need refinement. That doesn't bother me. But when it's wrong and misleading, and actively misleading as far as I'm concerned, there's a problem.
Okay, so I have seen your replies on the mailing list also. I understand where you're saying things are wrong, but I haven't seen your definition of isolation. How would you like to express it? Because
I don't
then we can
need for a definition of isolation. I don't believe the term is needed. I'm willing to leave a placeholder so that people can propose text for discussion, but I do not believe there is any need for the term. Therefore, I am not going to propose a definition.
Okay.
I wonder if anyone thinks they're talking because it's quite quiet.
That's what I was thinking. I was wondering if my internet was working.
Stuart, is it your internet? Wow, that explains a lot.
Same
Yeah,
situation.
global
I
VTech
lost it just
outage,
now, so I
according to the message.
but
So, but apparently things work now.
I can see no, I cannot see anything.
All of you.
Welcome back again. Seems like everybody got disconnected. So, can you guys hear me? Can someone acknowledge?
I can hear you.
Yes, Paul.
Okay. Give me 1 minute.
I had some issue. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hello?
yeah. I think the whole session dropped. It dropped for everyone.
Okay. 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 I thought it's only me.
No, we can hear you, Reza.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, the joy appears to be that there was a Meet Echo VM reboot.
Okay. Yeah, we are.
Yeah, that's a great thing in the middle of the meeting. So, I think we were in the middle of a discussion between Joel and Kieran.
Yes.
Let's see if we give people a minute. I think we're about at the same head count we were before.
Lou, is it possible that you could unshare your screen? As there's just a black screen there that's taking up half the share space.
Interesting.
I don't see an issue.
Now all I see is the black screen.
I'm republishing.
Yes, so we have both the black screen and the new screen. How elegant of Meet Echo.
I don't
Now
see
we've got
the
half screen.
I would say click reload, but I'm a little worried that you might not get back in.
Yeah, and in particular, right now, I don't need to see the screen for the conversation we were having.
Oh, right. So let me kick it off with a question to you, Joel.
Yes.
What I think I heard you say is that no definition of isolation would be acceptable to you. That's not what you said, but I think that's what I heard you really say.
I do not believe there is a definition of isolation that is useful, but I am perfectly willing to allow for discussion and proposal. But the definition that has been proposed is not useful, and I don't know of a useful definition, so I can't very well propose one. I mean, Ketan said, so Joel, why haven't you proposed a definition? And the answer is, because I don't think it's a useful concept to the task.
Okay. I think we can note that and move to the next person, unless you have another point you'd like to make.
My problem with the text as it is I consider it seriously misleading on the topic. That's why I was perfectly willing to the agreement that you two chairs said, we'll just put in a placeholder and we'll discuss separately what a definition might be.
Okay. Have you expressed how you think it's flawed on the list?
I believe so.
Okay. Sharon, do you think you believe you understand that? Is Kieran back?
I didn't see her.
We have to wait a moment then. Here we go.
Hear me now?
Yes. Welcome back.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. So yes, we have started some discussion, and what we got was initially scratch text from people who are already in the queue to answer that. One feedback is we are going to strip down a lot of information which is related to realization and have a minimal text so that there is a way to express isolation from a customer perspective. That's what I'm looking for right now. And we can have further discussions on the email list. And that is why this text is there in the draft, so that we can iteratively revise it so that everybody agrees to it. And one thing we are clearly saying, that we are not taking a stance that isolation is always related to SLO and it can be met by all the SLOs. You could have additional parameters that, or some additional characteristic which could come from regulatory perspective, or it could come from security side of things, or the perception of the customer who wants to deploy that slice. So we just want to provide a mechanism to express that characteristic.
I think it'd be really good to. I think it'd be really good to take this discussion more and follow it up on the list. Joel, if it's okay, we have a bunch of people in the queue, and we got a little delayed because of the Meet Echo. I think it'd be good to give them an opportunity to speak as well, if that's okay.
Fair.
Okay, thanks. Stuart, you're up.
Well, I want to start with making a fundamental objection to the position that Joel was taking. It is not his working group. It is not his right to object on behalf of the working group. It is the working group to take a decision, and he may or may not be in the rough. And I think that's a position that the chairs should take. As to isolation, I find it a useful concept. And found it a useful concept in the days when we were working on VPN Plus, because it, to my mind, it does describe the concept of two services operating in different universes. Now, we can work on text, but I'm not sure why one objection by one person to one section should stop a draft progressing.
I think that's directed at the chairs. I have not heard it stopping progressing. I've heard an individual's objection, and it's duly noted, and will continue to be discussed on the list. But it's, as you say, it's just one individual's objection. I think Yari.
Yeah. This is a difficult topic, and this is the reason why I said that it's important for us to agree on the bits that we do agree and move on. And actually, we had a really good process on this name issue. Like, we had people propose alternatives. You have an issue with what we had. Here's some alternatives that and pros and cons, and let's discuss that and make a decision. We didn't quite follow the same process in this other discussion. So it's more of like, this is text, and let's edit it if it needed, or take away or not take away. And so we didn't really do this, top-down thing that, hey, we could do A, B, or C, or D here. And I think that was a mistake. The discussion would have been easier if we had done that, and maybe there's still time to do that, perhaps. But so it should be noted that lots of people do have differing opinions on this aspect. I do too, by the way. I think the current text is somewhat misleading. There's been some discussion on the list, actually. If you follow this, Adrian posted a suggestion of a fairly drastic cut down of the text. Joel has said that he doesn't like to mention it at all, and so on. I actually agreed personally with Adrian's proposal. For me, not like nailing down the things that we need to do. I think, for me, what's important here is that we do mention these concepts, because it is talked about in the industry, but we need to relate it to our concepts, and we can't have this situation where we have like this concepts like, you have reserved bandwidth, and then wink, wink, you don't actually have reserved bandwidth. But if you have this other property, then you have reserved bandwidth, but wink, wink, it doesn't actually work if a node goes down. And then you must have a third concept of fault tolerance of some sort. So, there are some issues there, and I think we would do the industry a service if we actually sort of try to relate the industry terms to what we are speaking about. And I think that would be totally fine, because we still are talking about isolation then in the document. And we're not overselling it. We're not confusing anything. We are relating that this aspect can be represented by those things that we have elsewhere in the document, and then we move on. And a final comment is that I think part of the objection that Joel had was that whose default goes into the document. Like, we have several opinions about this stuff. Obviously, the working group decides, all of us together. But I understand his position that he doesn't want to start from somebody else's definition. If he would like to have his definition perhaps, or start from a blank sheet of paper where everybody is on the same position, kind of. So, if it was me, I would either start with empty section placeholder or Adrian's definition. I'd be happy with Adrian's definition also. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, so Jeff, you're up, and I'd like to cut the line if possible, because we are well over on the slot.
Sure. So since I
just to be clear, the people
I brought this term number of times to discuss with Joel, I actually stopped doing it because my impression is no definition will do anything. As long as it's empty, I'm okay. You put something in it, I'm unhappy. So, I mean, it shouldn't be like this. The definition I proposed, they come from my experience, personal experience. While it's not observable, it's definitely something and customers should be able to request. I've seen this in my life. It's definitely business and working agreement. So I believe it should be there. Whether it's under definition or whatever we already have in the draft, we can find the text as long as we want to come with the text and some definition, not to oppose to anything. So that's my position.
Jim?
G? Jimmy?
I just want to, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say that actually, because network slicing is not only defining IETF, and for the whole industry, isolation is described in almost all the network slicing related documents. And also in IETF's history, it has been mentioned in the VPN related requirements, frameworks, and solutions. So my opinion is clarifying the meaning of isolation in the IETF's context and its relationship with the other network slicing related activity would be really useful. And we have been working hard to separate the requirement from the implementation of the isolation. And I think many people give very good comments and suggestions, and I hope we could work together to polish it rather than just say, no, we don't need it. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Thank you, Greg.
And the current document reflects their agreement of the design team or of their those who are listed as authors of this document.
Sure what question you're really asking. In the end, we have to agree as a working group what the term is. So it's sort of, whoever contributed to it doesn't have special standing. We have to reach consensus as a working group. So it's, that's a starting point. Go ahead.
Because to my understanding is that there is no agreement within the design team whether isolation is something that observable or not. So I think that since there is no agreement, then why to have something which is questionable present to the working group for adoption? it's more logical is take it out, work it on, and when it's ready, then working group can add it to the document. Because the working group, when working group adopts a document, it's a working group document, and the working group decides their changes to the document. So if there is no clear understanding of what isolation for the network slice is, then just work on it as a separate work item. Thank you.
Dave?
Thanks, Lou.
And I hope the line was cut after Dave.
Okay. Yeah, my comments are more along the lines of what Greg just stated. I think there are differences of opinion. I don't think it was asserted that it was just Joel that had this opinion. I don't think that's correct. It seems like something this controversial to the group being put in and then asked for working group adoption is a little premature. It would be better to leave the placeholder in the document, have a reasonable discussion about the definition, and then if there's agreement, add text. At this point with the text in there, I would be against working group adoption. I mean, we have to start with what we agree with, not with what we don't agree with. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Clearly, there's more work to be done on this before we move to adoption. Kieran and the authors have said that they will continue to discuss it on the list. I think that's a good next step. Pavan and I will talk between ourselves as well as with Yari of whether or not it makes sense to have informal or a formal interim on just this piece. Clearly, it's really important that we have agreement on what it is we're doing, and fundamentally that's what we're doing with the definitions. And we do need to reach working group consensus on what it is we're doing. It's not one person or one set of people don't dictate to the rest of the working group its consensus, and clearly we don't have it yet on at least the isolation term. And it sounds like there's some good energy to help move us forward, and we'd like to see where that leads us. And again, we'll talk with Yari about what the next step is on an informal or formal meeting. Pavan, anything you want to add?
That's one quick thing.
Yes.
Lou?
Good.
Yeah, so that's one option, but you did have another option that you would go forward with, let's agree that we disagree and have a placeholder and have that discussion after adoption. I think the document might actually be adoptable if you did that.
Well, given that there's an active discussion going on, it might be good to see if we can reach any conclusions with that active discussion. And I was trying to leave room for that. Clearly, if in a few weeks we don't have any good resolutions, we can talk about where to go next. And I agree that just putting in a placeholder is a viable option. Pavan, you were going to add something?
No, I agree to that. I mean, we are at a stage where we need to make a call. So I think given that the discussion is happening and a few proposals have been made, let's discuss that. I mean, I'm not taking the placeholders thing totally out of the equation yet, but yeah, I mean, let's discuss it over the next week or so and see if there's a need for another interim. Okay, I think we are about 25 minutes running late by 25 minutes. We can, if there's anything else on this topic, we can jump to Reza's presentation.
Yes, let's wait for the slides. The topic of this presentation is application of IETF network slicing in 5G. On behalf of my co-authors, I'm going to present this one. Next slide, please.
Let's try to do it in 5 minutes, if that's okay.
The draft of this presentation, was presented at IETF 105. Now the main changes that happen to the draft is to be aligned with the definition of the IETF network slice, exactly how it fits in 5G. All the terminology, everything that has been done in NSDT is reflected here, and the content of this draft is shown here. How IETF network slice related to 5G, how they are related, and everything related to the northbound interface and details of the IETF network slicing is well described in the draft. Next slide. As you've seen here, and this is basically taking from the definition draft, network slicing as a concept is related not only to 5G, but other use cases. In this draft, specifically, we are going to talk about 5G network slicing, how it relates, and we try to address everything that happened on the NSDT, how it relates to 5G. If you go to the next slide, the next two slides trying to just give a context visually how that relates to 5G. For the end-to-end network slice as a whole, as you see here, from the left to the right, we have started from the UE user equipment all the way to the RAN domain, to transport domain, and the core domain. How various area or various domain related to end-to-end network slice clearly shown here, that end-to-end network slice as a whole has component in the RAN, transport, or core. The portion which is related to our work is the yellow one that is related to IETF network slice. This is important to note that this picture, and it's applicable to other use cases as well, that the network slice is not end-to-end network slice. This is important to understand that why we call it IETF network slice related to the end-to-end context. It's important to consider this picture when we go through the rest, that when we talk about IETF network slice, is not the end-to-end context. And it is very important, and the pictures clearly show that this is only one component of end-to-end context. Next slide. This to see the same problem from the different angle, as you seen here, starting from bottom up of this picture, I have different networks. I have RAN network, I have various transport networks, and I have the core network. Whatever transport network provides is providing the connectivity between various components. And in a specific, in 5G, I try to show the component that needed to be connected, because the whole idea of IETF network slice definition starts from the connection with a specific SLA/SLO. In the 5G, in a specific, the connectivity that we do connectivity inside the RAN network. We are doing the connectivity between RAN network and core network, and potentially in the core network. These are various transfer slices, IETF network slices, which well described in the document. Why we need that depends on your RAN deployment. There are various changes or various IETF network slice will be introduced, and I also refer to the definition draft and picture that we use in the context of 5G. Next slide, please. I have two more slides. The definition draft, in this case, this is a summary of the work. We will define the IETF network slice use case in the 5G, and in a specific, the NBI that we need. We discussed that there are potential some augmentation needed to be done in the NBI, the draft, there is some informational model. We are still working on that one, but this is the main topic of this draft. And last slide, we are seeking for feedback, comments. We continuously aligned this draft with NSDT work and everything that is happening in a specific in the area of the NBI that we need, and the proposed the draft and the enhancement will be presented in the next IETF. There are two questions. Please go ahead.
Go ahead, Shusang. Shusang?
Draft document and about the section 3 for 5G end-to-end splicing. I think if the work is related to IETF, it is primarily the splitting, maybe slicing requirements and mapping mapping transport slice to other slices from different domains. So I think maybe this part of work could consider to combine with the existing work in T's working group. I think maybe you have also read our document about the 5G end-to-end network slice mapping. I think it can be combined. And what do you think?
I will take a look. Let's have that one on the mailing list. Sure. If there are some synergy between those documents, for sure we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
My
Yeah, send Shusang. Okay, if please send that reference on the list, and yeah, when Reza can and discuss it with Reza. I think we should
Sure.
move on to the next comment. Jimmy.
Okay.
Jimmy G.
Yes, can you hear me now?
I would have to cut the line after G. Sorry,
Ah,
G. Go ahead. You go ahead.
you can hear me now?
Gets cut. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I see this draft mentions several topics like the use cases in 5G network slice and the relationship between the IETF slice and the 5G end-to-end slice. Also, it mentions some data models like for the not-bound interface. So I'm asking which topic will be the most important for this draft, and some of this other part may be relatively overlapped with some work in the design team and also the not-bound interface model. And as Shusang mentioned, the end-to-end slice mapping draft, maybe my suggestion would be maybe this one can focus on the use cases, and for the other part can coordinate with other documents in the working group.
If I understand your question correctly, so this document for the first two items that you mentioned, they are not overlapping, but rather try to extend the abstract definition that we have for IETF network slice in the 5G. So northbound included definition on that. And for the last item, as I mentioned, if there is synergy, we can combine it. So I know that we don't have time to go through more details, but if there are other comments, please put it in the main list and we can cover it accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Louis?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Perfect. Okay, hello everyone.
If you can keep it to 5 minutes, that would be great, Louis.
So next slide, please. Okay, so the motivation of this work, of this document is basically to consider the, I'm not sure if this is the proper, sorry. This is for the use cases, right? Not for the...
Okay. Luke, can you shift to the other presentation? Or if you can do it in a different order, then.
The title was wrong, I think, but I think this is the proper presentation. So this is the one about use cases. Yeah. So essentially here is that we don't have yet a clear view of what could be the potential use cases in that the consuming, let's say, the IETF network slices. So the intention of this document was essentially go through the different potential use cases and start and try to get from them different attributes, different procedures in order to understand what could be the behavior of the expected the behavior of the node-bound interface. So next slide, please. So we will go quickly through different use cases already identified in this document. The first one will be about 5G services. It's related with what Teresa was presenting before. So the objective will be essentially to support end-to-end network slices as defined for 5G systems, essentially in 3GPP. And regarding any node-bound interface attributes, we could consider SLOs such downlink, uplink throughput, or slice QoS parameters, for instance, and plus additional characteristics such group communication support of non-IP traffic, etc., etc. Regarding procedures, we could consider here the procedures defined in 3GPP for a slice cycle, for instance, slice instance allocation, the allocation, modification status, etc., etc. Regarding applicability of the network slice in this context, essentially would be for the N3, N9, and N6 interfaces in order to support the different slice types defined in 3GPP, enhanced mobile broadband, ultra reliable low latency, and so on and so forth. Taking as references the GSMA is generic slice template and the 3GPP spec on control and management of slices. Next slide, please. An additional use case would be the NFV-based services. So the objective here would be the support of connectivity between virtual network functions that are instantiated in remote NFVI points of presence. Regarding NVI attributes that could be identified would be SLOs, such incoming and outgoing bandwidth, QoS metrics, etc., and additional characteristics such as directionality, protection scheme, and so on and so forth. Regarding NVI procedures, will be all related to life cycle, capacity, fault, and performance management of these multi-site connectivity services, as defined by HCNFV. The applicability clearly will be the communication between these remote NFVI POPs in order to support the different SLOs that could be requested by this connectivity. The reference here are a couple of specs from HCNFV, the IFA 32 and the SOL 17, which specify the expected behavior for these communications. Next slide, please. The last documented use case would be the one of RAN sharing. Here, the objective would be the provisioning of connectivity between cell sites and interconnection points between operators for essentially for delivering the traffic from these shared radio cell sites. Regarding NBI attributes that could be expected would be for sure SLO such maximum and guaranteed bit rate, bounded latency, packet loss rate, etc., and additional characteristics such as secure connection, IP addressing, and so. Respect to the MPI procedures that could be expected for the use case would be provision of connectivity services, collection of performance and fault data, etc., etc. The applicability of the IETF network slice in this context would be the multi-tenancy of mobile front haul, mid haul, and back haul. And the reference, this is not normative, but is the descriptive, is the Metro Ethernet Forum white paper on front haul, back haul sharing. Next slide, please. So this is the final one. The next steps would be to complete the draft with new use cases. We have in mind to describe evolution of wholesale services and cloud computing-based services. Regarding the document, after that, the idea would be to elicit common SLOs, attributes, and procedures for all the cases in such a way that we could document in an additional chapter within the draft. And with respect to the group, so the idea here would be the idea of the presentation to collect feedback and comments from the working group to check if this work could be progress as part of the work in the network slicing design team, and for sure to prepare a new version for next meeting. And this is all from my side.
Okay. Any comments? We don't have anybody on the queue, so yeah, you can go to your next presentation.
Okay, thank you. So this presentation is about idea of how is structuring the IETF network slice controller, and also how to place the different models regarding to this structure. So next slide, please. So regarding the problem to be addressed, that impacts on how the potential structure in terms of components of the network slice controller is to understand that there will be two essential procedures to be performed by the network slice controller. Essentially, the mapping of the IETF network slice requests as coming from the customer, and then the realization of those slices. Regarding the data models, we could consider two different views. The customer view, which is focused on the individual IETF network slice request per customer, and the provider view that essentially consider all the slices being provisioned, being realized in the network. So these two different views are complementary and necessary for making it work. So the goal of the document is essentially to identify the major network slice controller components and how the associated data models apply to these components, or to the interfaces between components. Next slide, please. So zooming into the high-level structure of that is reflected in the network slice definition document, we could take this IETF network slice controller entity and trying to let's say, divide in some major components. Sorry. So regarding the structure, we identified these two major components: the mapper, that would be the component in charge of processing the customer request and putting it into the context of the overall IETF network slices in the network, and the realizer, that would be essentially the one that processes the complete view of all the slices and decides the proper technologies for realizing the IETF network slice below in the IETF technologies used for that. And regarding the models, you can see in the picture in the middle three different interfaces that are labeled as A, B, and C. So the first try of mapping the models to these interfaces, we understand, and we would see that the customer view is covered by the WDT's IETF network slice MBI Young model. The interface labeled as B will be the provider view that could be accomplished by the LIU TS transport network slice Young model, and the models in C would be essentially the ones that are used for going against all the network controllers below, and would be out of the scope of this document. Next slide, please. So the next step would be to solve some open points that are signaled as to-do items into the document. We have identified two so far. So one would be the breakdown of NS mapper and NS realizer as these major components that we do foresee. The second one would be to discuss the complementarity of the aforementioned models for satisfying type 1 and type 2 services as per ACTN RFC. So the point here is that we need to discuss to what extent the model labeled as B could also accomplish on customer request, as customer slice request. Then to collect feedback and comments from the working group for sure, to propose the draft as agreed outcome of the TS network slice design team. By the way, all the co-authors of this document are co-authors of the two proposed models, so there is a consensus on that. And then to prepare a new version for next meeting. And that's all from my side.
We have Adrian in the queue. Adrian?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Luis, for this document. I think it's useful to pull things together the way you've done. Can I beg you to go and look at RSC 8309, which is the Ops Area Working Group view of how Yang models are composed to provide a top-to-bottom delivery of a service, and maybe map to that or use some of that terminology to be consistent with what the IETF has already done.
For sure. We will proceed in that way. Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks. I'll drop that to the list.
Thank you.
Okay. Boris, can you keep it short?
Yeah. Okay.
I will try. Luis, very short question. Could you mention what network controller could be optional because in some cases network NSC will be more than enough to provision it. So network controller could be like optional in several cases, in my opinion.
So you refer to the ones at the bottom, right? Totally at the bottom. The one. We essentially took the high-level architecture that was in definitions. Maybe this is something that we could also address. So maybe we can add a discussion topic, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bo, you're up next.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm here to present for the IETF network slice northbound interface YAM model. Next slide, please. Luis just mentioned that there could be multiple IETF network slice related model to be like implemented in for different networks like controller. And this draft is the goal of this draft is to define a northbound interface YAM model. And since the terminology has been changed for the network slice, so this draft has been changed. So you can notice the name has changed because we have been proposed for discussion in the working group and also network slice design team for several times. So and this YAM model is quite consistent with IETF network slice definition draft. So this is the reason why we changed the name. And we also received some comment about how this NBI model to work with the relationship with other YAM model. So we give the some explanation about things. IETF has classified YAM modules into different categories, and like there could be service model and network model and also the device model. So the NBI, this IETF network slice NBI model falls into the category of service model. Also, Luis mentioned this is from the consumer view, and this model maybe will work together with other layers model to be integrated together to fulfillment the IETF network slice service and network management automation. So next slide, please. Chair? Yes, okay. Based on the discussion of IETF network slice definition, NBI YAM model should fill the requirements that this model should work not only for the configuration, but also for the monitoring. So when modeling this model, we think the YAM model should fill these requirements. And this YAM model borrow the definition from IETF network slice definition draft, like the IETF, the left-hand side is a view from the slice definition draft. It's a view from a much high level, and there could be one IETF network slice. They will be related to different NSE, that's network slice endpoints. So in our modeling, we also use this terminology, and we expand it to more details. So I just give some high-level design consideration about the network slice connection group, because some of our authors think there could be use cases that in one IETF network slice could be multiple different SLO requirements for different network slice members. Members means that a pair of network slice endpoints connections. So we created this new concept in the modeling. And also we think we need to create a network slice member concept for the monitoring modeling. So here, that's the modeling thinking. And
can we skip to next steps? I'm sorry, we're really tight on time.
Yeah, okay. Then we finish this part, and our consideration is we would like to seek more comments from the working group and more input for the designing, modeling designing. So that's all for these slides. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron? You're muted.
Ran, go ahead. There is a unmute button at the top, the mic symbol. And can you hear us?
Ran, if you would mind just typing in Jabber when you think you have it working, and we will go to Tarek. And Tarek, just because of the time, if you can do your first one in 5 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. Hi, and my name is Tarek. I'm one of the authors, and the topic is realizing network slices in IP MPLS networks. Next slide, please. Next slide. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. So a quick overview of the agenda. I'll cruise over the introduction with whatever time I can crunch in. I want to talk about the slice per hop definition and how it facilitates the creation of the slice, and see if I can go over the multiple approaches to network slicing that we have in the draft, and then I'll close off with the next steps. Next slide, please. So the solution we adopt is based on the diff-serve principles for network slicing, the network resources, the shared network resources, and to ensure the proper placement of the path and getting the traffic treatment for slice traffic when it's traversing the shared network resources. The solution we're proposing is agnostic to the path control technique used to set up the path in the slice domain, be it SR, RZP, or others. It takes into account that slices will have to be created dynamically and changed, managed dynamically, and on demand. Yeah, we have consideration for different types of traffic carried over the same slice, and for that we rely on the diff-serve class selector field in the different data plane technologies. Next slide, please. So there are 3 approaches to the solution that to realize network slicing. One is a control plane only slicing of the network resources. The second is a data plane only slicing of the network resources. And the third is the combination of control plane and data plane slicing of the resources. In our solution, as I mentioned, we introduced this slice per hop definition. This definition encompasses a data plane slice selector, a set of parameters for the data plane resources, a QoS profile, the per hop behaviors related to the slice. As well, it encompasses a set of control plane resources associated with the slice with respect to reservable bandwidth priorities of reservation in the control plane, and any shared resource groups that this slice is willing to share resources with. And the last piece of information that the slice per hop definition will contain is a reference to a topology that defines the links and nodes that this slice that belongs to this slice. There are multiple ways to disseminate this slice per hop definition that we looked into. One of them is a suitable netcom for gRPC interface once we have laid down the data model. The other approach is disseminating this or exchanging this in a routing protocol like IGP or BGP, and the last is the manual configuration of the definition. Next slide, please. We are on slide 4. Yeah, so, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you wrap up so we have some time for others?
Indeed. Okay. So the slice per hop definition I mentioned, it contains the slice data plane slice selector. It's a field that is carried in the packets. There are multiple variations for this. I'll leave you to go over the multiple options and where one is more suitable for different use cases or deployments. We mentioned that there is a QoS profile associated with a slice. Can we move on to the next slide, please? And as well, the control plane resource management, the different parameters associated with it. Lastly, the topology that defines the links and nodes associated with the slice. So these are the pieces. There are 3 slides and subsequent slides here that define different approaches to network slicing. The first one is the data plane only slicing. And in that one, there's no network state maintained in the control plane. The second one is the control plane only slicing of the network resources. And in here, we have the resources in the control plane being sliced without consideration or without the data plane being knowledgeable about slices. And the last one is the combination of the two of the previous two. We think that the last one will give us the strict guarantees that we're looking for. At least we're trying to standardize in IETF. Unfortunately, I don't have much time. But okay, so in terms of next steps, we are going to coordinate with a number of drafts that are already out there with respect to protocol extensions for slice aware traffic engineering. We do request the working group to review the document and give us feedback, and we appreciate that. I don't know how much time do I have. I have another set of slides that describe the slice per hop.
I'm sorry, with the disruption and then also the good conversation we had on the potential topic, we're out of time. I'm sorry.
No
Ran,
problem.
are you available? You were going to try a different account. Ran, are you out there?
Hi.
Hello.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. Hi.
5 minutes, please.
Yeah. I'm Zan from ZTE. Okay, I will quickly. I will do the prioritization with the packet network selection using segment routing. Next, please. Yeah. A unified administrative instance identifier AI is used to distinguish different virtual network resources for both intra-domain and inter-domain network slices scenario. Now let's look at the AI from the following 6 items. The first is AI is identifier of the dedicated virtual network for the slice. The second is it supports the end-to-end slicing. And the third is identifier the unified ASI across multi-domain of transport network. The fourth is AI is one of the constraint criteria of the color template, and the color template with AI provide a more flexible control. The fifth is the uniform color template for overlay service mapping to analyze results. The sixth is its AI meet the link requirements from 3GPP. It is independent of the existing domain partitions of the network, and it is also the independent of the existing underlay frame and all routing technologies. There is no modification to the forwarding tables except queues policy per slice. Next, please. There is an example of our solutions. In figure, there are two topologies, red and blue. The red topologies include node H1234E and link between H112, 131434 and the 4E. The blue topology include node H1234E and link between H3, 343112, 3242 and 2E. Let's see the process of creating the slice. The first, select the AI to the slice, and the second, allocate resources to the AI. The third is AI information is advertised through control plane. The controller connects the resource information with AI through BGP-LS. Then the controller can build the corresponding SR virtual topology and can calculate different paths according to the color with AI information in each virtual network. Next, please. Next, please. Yes, AI as a set of TN resources identifiers. Our solutions support soft and hard isolations. For L3 interface oscillations in IGP domain, each numbered or unnumbered L3 link could be configured with AI information and synchronized among IGP neighbors. The IGP link state database will contain L3 links with AI information to support T-path computations. Take account of AI criteria. Each L3 link could be configured to belong to a single AI or multiple AIs. For L2 interface isolation, each L2 member link of L3 parent link suggested to be configured to belong to a single AI. And different L2 members link will have different single AI configuration with different agency set. L2 member could be any type interface, such as Ethernet, VLAN interface, flexi channels, T-path computations based on link state database. Okay, sorry. Next, please. Next slide. Yes, this is a multiple domain deployment. It is easy to provide end-to-end virtual network, including the interdomain. In some deployment, operator adopt BGP-LU for set up the BGP-LU LSP. The overlay service will directly over the BGP-LU LSP. If the overlay service have the requirement of the TE, which defined as the color, the BGP-LU will also support the color. The BGP-LU labels will allocate per color. The below is option B, interdomain. It can also provide end-to-end virtual network, including the interdomain link. The interdomain link can also choose the link based on the color with the AI. Next, please. It's the end-to-end SRT with SDN. The BGP-LS will be used to inform the topology information contained the AI to the controller. The controller can calculate the SR path based on the information for the interdomain link. BGPLS can advertise the direct protocol type, or firstly put in the domain interconnections to IGP instance, then always import date from IGP protocol source. Next, please. Yes, this is combined with SR flex algorithm. There are two scenarios. For interdomain case, SDN controller can create VN for AI based on AI, and VN for FA AI based on FA respectively. SDN controller computers end-to-end segment list. Each contains multiple AIs and based on different topologies. However, for distinguished mode and border node, AI with endogenous IGP metric, delay
And
T
can you
metric.
wrap this up?
Okay,
Can you?
sorry. Yes, next, please. Yes, this draft also will register some standard AI values to represent different types of AI, like normal, URLLC, and TE. Next, please. And for the endogenous of select type EMBB, MIOT, V2X will be to be defined and will be defined in future. Yes, next, please. Comments welcome. Thanks.
Okay. Luis, yeah, can you introduce your draft in a minute or two? And
Yeah, can you go directly to slide 3? I will do on top of that. Slide number 3 here, the scenario. So yeah, basically in this draft, what we are trying to address is the situation that now operators are starting to deploy computing facilities. There is a wide deployment of different sizes and a different number of resources. So the idea would be to have a joint topological view of both the working and computing resources available. Such a way that we could take better decisions, engineering decisions, taking into account also the compute domain, not only the network domain, but the compute domain. So somehow this is similar approach as the one following the Drive IETF's service function aware topology model. So it's an original piece of work of that draft that has taken its proper life. So in the picture scenario, essentially, you can see there the different data center POPs with different resources, and the idea would be to incorporate the description of those resources into the model, augmenting the TE model. These resources could be raw resources, CPU, memory, storage, or being described in terms of quotas or bundles. And we drop here an example like in the CNTT. So essentially, what we expect is to adapt the model to different ways of exposing data center capabilities, work on the YAM modules accompanying such model, and for sure to receive any feedback or comment that could come from the working group on this. And that's all from my side.
thanks, Luis.
Thank you very much for the quick summary. Apologize about the interruption in the middle, which squeezed an already tight meeting closer. Please stay tuned to the list, participate in the list discussion, and look. Look for both the formal and informal meetings that happen regularly. We remind everyone that the informal meetings are open to all, and your contribution is most welcome. Thank you all so much in participating in this active meeting, and we look forward to resolving some of the open discussions and moving forward with adoption with the design team documents once we seem to have some better agreement on the terminology. Again, thank you all, and really appreciate the contribution and hard work. Pavan?
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, we'll see you soon.